Hey guys, Abaddon21 here. In this video we're going to talk about the Svipul tactical destroyer. I think CCP needs to release a pronunciation guide with some of these ships, just like they do some of the system names in EVE. But the Svipul is the best I can get it. The Svipul is the new Tech 3 tactical destroyer for Minmatar. They've already done the Confessor, which I may make a video on at some later date. But the Svipul is the newest Tech 3 tactical destroyer. Being a Minmatar ship, it flies like a lot of other Minmatar ships. I could show you some of the fits I already have, but if I did that, I wouldn't be able to tell you as much about the ship, how it works, and in general how you fit a ship from scratch. A ship that you've never really seen, you don't know, and how you can look at the different stats of that ship and decide what to put on it, why you put it on it, and all that stuff. Not to mention, even if you're not going to fly this ship, understanding how the ship works will help you to counter the ship should you ever come up against it in PvP. So for example, if at one point you come up against a ship that you lose against in a PvP fight because you didn't understand that ship and how it worked, you can make yourself a better PvPer by going into EFT and learning more about that ship so that the next time you know how to counter it. Alright, so the first thing we need to do when we're deciding how to fit a ship from scratch is look at the ship's bonuses, which we do by hovering over the little question mark up here. If it's ever going to come up. There it is. Alright, it's a Minmatar or the skill that gives you the bonuses is the Minmatar Tactical Destroyer skill. I highly recommend you get that to level 5. It's huge, huge, huge. It only takes like 14 days to get to level 5. It's not a big deal, and it's definitely worth it. Once you have it at level 5, you're going to get 10% per level for turret damage and optimal range, and 5% per level to module heat damage. That means it overloads longer without your modules burning out. So you've got 50% at level 5 turret damage increase and optimal range increase. The optimal range increase favors artillery over autocannons because autocannons come with a base very small optimal range, and a 50% increase in optimal range to 0.4 or 0.6, it doesn't make a big difference. It's only an extra 0.3 or something like that. It's not a huge difference, but it does help. It definitely helps. So the next bonus that's kind of just an overall bonus is a 95% reduction to scan probe launcher CPU requirements. That means that this ship can fit a scan probe, like an extended probe launcher, and actually scan down ships, which opens up some possibilities for some hunting of larger targets, but we'll talk about that more later. The real key to this ship and all the tactical destroyers is that it has 3 modes that you can put the ship in. It's like a transformer, and you can go into different modes, and actually Svipul, I believe, because I looked it up to try to find out what the exact pronunciation was, and I believe it means changing or something in the original language. It was the name of one of the Valkyries or something, and it means changing. I don't know, but that's what it means. So the defensive mode gives you a 33% bonus to shield and armor resists when you're in that mode, and a 66% reduction in micro warp drive signature radius. That makes you smaller when you're micro warp driving, and therefore you'll take a little bit less damage when the micro warp drive's on. Propulsion mode gives you a 66% bonus to your velocity. That's huge. That's so huge. That's a massive difference. A 33% bonus to ship inertia. That's your agility. That means that it gives your ship pretty much a line time similar to an interceptor. And for that matter, you'll see the speeds get similar to interceptors as well. Sharpshooter mode is what you would likely use with artilleries. Other than artilleries, I don't think you're ever going to use it. It's not something that's going to be very beneficial to you with autocannons in most cases, unless there's something like just crazy fast and small that you're having trouble tracking. So sharpshooter mode is 33% to tracking and a 100% bonus to sensor strength, targeting range, scan resolution, all that stuff. So sharpshooter mode would help you with your lock time. You'd lock things faster. You could lock targets from further away, and the sensor strength means that it would be harder for them to jam you. So perhaps if you were being ECM'd, you could switch to sharpshooter mode, and that would then raise your sensor strength right here 100%, which means it would go to 25.6. So now we've got our setup. So it's a blank setup. How do we know how to fit this? Well, from what we just saw, we know we need to fit small projectile turrets. We know it favors artillery in a lot of ways, but it doesn't have to be artillery. So the first thing that comes to my mind is I want to decide how I'm going to tank this ship. I make one of two decisions when I decide where I want the ship to go. One, is it going to be artillery or is it going to be autocannon? Two, what kind of tank is going to fit best on this ship? Knowing what tank's best for it is going to lead you to a lot of your other decisions. So to figure out what tank's best, we look at the stats. These are the base stats with nothing fitted, nothing at all. Let's go to all level 5 just to give it a fair look. So it's all level 5s. And here we go. We got 875 armor hit points. That comes out to an effective of 2,245. You have 1,000 shield hit points. That's just base without resist. And so you see the shield's already a little bit better in that factor. And you also see the shield is 2,726. So there's more effective shields than there is armor. You look at the armor resistance multiplier, and it's 5.2. It's 2.566. There's 2.7. So you can see that there is a definite. It definitely favors shield. The hit points are more for shields to start with, and the multiplier is higher for the resistance. So therefore, this ship naturally prefers to be shield tanked. That means, for one, because you have to have some kind of tackle and propulsion, you're going to have 2 tank slots. If you were doing a armor tank, you could make up for that slight decrease in armor hit points because you have more slots with which to build your armor tank. So it can be fit as an armor tank, and there's certainly going to be people out there that do it. However, this tells me that this ship wants to be a shield tank. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm decided that I want to do an autocannon fit first. I want something max DPS. I basically want a rifter on roids. So that's what I'm going to go for first. I'm going to start with a micro warp drive. You always want to use the limited 1MN micro warp drive. Always. Never use Tech 2. Never, ever, ever use Tech 2. There are very few situations where Tech 2 is better, and it's pretty much never. But just always use limited 1MN. It's the best one. Better fitting stats, better capacitor stats, everything. So we've got that limited 1MN micro warp drive. Then we need our point. We're going to use a scram. This is our tackle. Go ahead with a Tech 2 warp scram. It's maximum range. Got a 9K range. Alright, so we've got our basic speed and tackle. Now comes our guns. I want to get the biggest guns I can get on this thing for autocannons. So I'm going to go with Tech 2 200mm autocannons all the way down. Looking pretty good so far. We've got 219 firepower. I'm going to add faction ammo. Phase plasma is kind of my standard. If you don't know what damage type to do, phase plasma is probably your best choice. However, you should carry EMP, fusion, hail, and barrage as well, and switch based on the circumstance in the ship. So we've got our phase plasma, and our DPS goes up to 250. That's looking good. So everything looks good. We've got tons of power grid left. That's something I'm noticing right now from the very beginning. This ship has tons of power grid compared to all the other destroyers in the game. That power grid is massive for a destroyer. So now let's go in and let's get kind of the every ship module that, honestly, the damage control tends to be overused. There's a lot of situations where you just shouldn't use the damage control, but people just use it out of habit. That said, I think it's probably fine to use it here. We're not going to... There's not many other modules I could put down there that are going to make a big difference. Later on you'll see I probably could switch that out for something like a tracking enhancer, but you really don't need it in this situation. Now we've got that, we need our tank. So for our tank we come over here to shield, and what you're going to see is you're going to see a lot of people out there fitting this ship because it's the meta, as people would say, for fitting a ship like this. And you're going to have people coming in there and they're going to fit 2 medium ancillary shield boosters because they like to see this pretty defense number, and once you get the rigs it goes up even further. And it's certainly a possibility. For me, however, and for my advice to you, I like to fly ships. No, that's not true. I fly with ASBs all the time, but I like to, if possible, to fly with buffer on a shield ship rather than an active tank, especially if I'm not planning on doing long drawn out fights. The reason that I prefer buffer, I mean, if you want to do the math and get real deep into this thing, these 2 medium ancillary shield boosters are going to get you marginally more hit points than if you were to do just something like this. 2 medium shield extenders. So with 2 medium shield extenders now, you can see you've gained a ton of hit points. And if we switch this to defensive mode, to do that you just right click inside the window here, tactical destroyer mode. Oh, it is defensive mode. Okay, so that's good. I'm going to leave it there. Then we've got 19,000. When we add rigs, that's going to go up quite a bit. So having the total hit points versus the total hit points you could rep over the course of the fight, I much favor the shield extender and the buffer, simply because, not because you can tank more over, say, 2 minutes, but because you can tank more over 30 seconds. A lot of your fights, you're not going to have time to get all that rep in, and if you're trying to manage your points, you're trying to manage your guns, you're trying to manage micro warp drive, your range, trying to watch the scanner, PvP can be very overwhelming, especially if you're new to it and you haven't got used to micromanaging all these different things. The simpler you keep your ship, the more successful you will be in PvP. That's why this fit that I'm giving you right here is probably my most recommended fit for this Svipul tactical destroyer. It's simple. It keeps it simple. You don't have to manage a lot of stuff. Just get to the target, point the target, kill the target. That's pretty much it. Manage your range. Make sure you stay as close as possible. You can see here 1.1 optimal, like I was saying before. That optimal bonus, it gave us an extra 0.4 probably to our optimal range. Most of the time you're in fall off, but if you can keep them within optimal, within 1.1, you're going to do more damage to them. So, simple tank, lots of hit points. To give you a something to compare it to, 15,000 hit points is what you would see from a heavy tanked assault frigate. In most cases, like a Jaguar. 15,000 is a not great tanked cruiser. Once we go in here and we add our rigs, we're going to see that jump up quite a bit, and then our tank's going to look more like kind of your average cruiser. So you're talking about cruiser level hit points here on a destroyer, which is pretty freaking awesome. Not to mention that recharge. So let's come in here and let's go shield rigs. I am a big proponent of Tech 2 rigs because they've gotten so cheap and they make a really nice difference to the fit, and any edge you can get is going to make a difference. That doesn't mean you have to use them. If you wanted to, you could use Tech 1 rigs instead of Tech 2 and still get a similar result. For us, however, we're going to go ahead and spend the extra roughly 15 mil to get Tech 2 rigs here. Total 15 mil extra. We're going to use small core defense field extenders. What those do is they give you more shield hit points. They don't increase resists, they just increase your shield hit points and thus your effective hit points. For resists, you would use these things. Now, if I was doing an ASB tank, I would focus on resists. If I'm doing a buffer tank like I'm doing now, because your resists are already pretty awesome, there's no holes here to fill. You see, the only possible holes would be thermal and kinetic, and 65% is not a hole. There's no hole to fill, therefore no resist rigs. On most ships, there's going to be an EM hole if it's a shield tank, and you're going to have to put like a Tech 2 EM screen reinforcer. If it's a cheap ship, you go Tech 1. But for something that's a little bit more expensive, and this ship by no means is expensive, I think this whole fit right here is probably less than 80 mil, 90 mil, 80 probably. So pretty cheap. So we want 3 small core defense field extenders. Here we go. Watch the effective hit points. 1, 2, 3. So we are up to 23,800 hit points. See, we have no implants in, nothing to increase that. No links, nothing, just 23,000 hit points. That's pretty incredible. Our DPS output's a little bit anemic at this point. 250 is not bad for a frigate, but it's not good for a destroyer, so we definitely need to work on that. Luckily, we have low slots available. On a shield tanked ship, your low slots are usually focused on one of 2 things: gun damage and or tracking and range, so gun upgrades, or speed upgrades, or a combination thereof. In our case, this is the type of ship that's got a big buffer. You want to be able to get in, pound a ship, just drop it fast, and knock it off, knock it out of the fight, and potentially go on to the next ship, or potentially warp out before all the other guys' buddies land on top of you and gank you. So we want to have high DPS. High DPS means you get in and get out faster. Having high DPS is usually preferable over having a great tank, because being able to get the kill and get away is better. I mean, you're never going to have a Svipul that can tank 20 people at the same time. While you may be able to do that with a few ships in the game, very few, you're not going to do it with a Svipul. So what we're going to do is we're going to come in here and we're going to go to Gyro Stabilizers. Those are the ones that boost autocannons. Our damage goes 310, 370. That's pretty good. The next thing we could do here is a tracking enhancer, but I don't think it's going to make much difference. See, there's not much difference to the range. We could do another gyro stab, but it's going to kill our CPU, so that's not good. Our CPU is already mostly used. We could probably make that third gyro stab fit if we were to either drop this damage control to a named. You could drop it to an internal. Wouldn't affect your hit points very much, and it would probably get you the hit points needed. If not, you could then go to the warp scrambler to a named, and just for fun, let's just do that so you see how to do it in the future. This is how you free up CPU. These are the tricks that are most often used. Is switch the Tech 2 to warp scrambler to a faint epsilon, same range, better capacitor statistics, and just in general the better warp scrambler, just like the micro warp drive. The best Tech 1 is better than the Tech 2. In this case, the best Tech 1 damage control is not better than the Tech 2, but it takes a lot less CPU, therefore you can make all this fit. So with this, you can fit 3 gyro stabs, but I'm not happy with that because of the diminishing returns you get off that third gyro stab. Let's have a look. 417, 370. So that's actually really not bad. That's 47 extra DPS output, and that's actually going to increase when we do our implants. But that is a really nice increase in DPS, and I think this is a valid fit right here. You'd have to find something for that high slot that didn't take any CPU, which there's nothing. There's nothing you can put in that high slot without downgrading your shield extenders. That's another way to make room for fitting, is to drop your shield extenders down to medium FS9s. They're almost as good as far as hit points, but take a lot less fitting for the power grid and CPU. I like this fit just as it is right here. So this fit right here, this is good. 100 defense, passive. That's passive. So you could probably tank most other pilots with 5 light drones. You could pretty much passively tank them, like a Drake. And you could tank them and no problem. Plus that massive buffer means it's going to take them forever to burn through you. Just as an example, a 200 a frigate with say 250 DPS output, that's something kind of like maybe a Wolf or a Ishkur or something like that. Doing 250 DPS is going to take roughly 2 minutes to kill you, probably longer. And that's 2 minutes while you're applying 417 DPS. You've won that fight every day of the week. You could probably take 2 of them in that time. So that's a good fit, but we're not going to go with that. I'm going to drop that. I'm going to come in here. Drop that. Back to the damage control 2. Damage control 2 gives us slightly more tank. See, it's 23,800 compared to 23,500. That's really marginal. So, there we go. Damage control 2. It saves a lot of money too. Those internals are like 8 million each, I think. So you're going to save a lot of money by using a Tech 2 over an internal. This extra low slot needs to be filled now. I want to be able to put something in this high slot. I feel wasteful if I don't. So to put something in that high slot, I need to keep CPU open. To do that, I'm going to go and I'm going to focus on our speed. This is basically, like I was saying before, I'm thinking Rifter when I'm thinking this fit. So I'm just making a super Rifter. And the Rifter to me is a shield buffer, fast, high DPS. It's just an awesome ship. And it used to be the king of frigate PvP back before they buffed all the other Tech 1 frigates. So what we're going to do is we're going to add to the speed and the agility. So right here we're going 1700. Now that's not in propulsion mode. Let's take it to propulsion mode. Propulsion mode, like we said before, it's going to give us a 33 or 66% increase to speed and a 33% increase in agility. So you see our agility dropped 4 seconds align time, 2900 mobility. That's fast. Let's add our internal microfiber or nanofiber internal. And boom, we're up to 3,200 meters a second. That's fast. I mean, right now, you're getting close to interceptor speed, 3.3 second align time with the micro warp drive on. That's interceptor level. That might even be Dramiel level agility. That's incredible, really incredible. And we're actually going to improve that some in just a second when we get down to implants. So we've got our fit almost done. What else can we do here? Well, there's nothing more irritating in a PvP fight, destroyer versus destroyer, frigate versus frigate, or in any ship really, than a newt. That we could put a rocket launcher in the slot and take the DPS up an extra 15, 17, something like that. Not a huge amount. But instead of doing that, I think a newt is better. Because let's say you go up against a confessor, or a harpy, or an Inyo, or anything with active guns, and potentially an active tank. What that means is that that active tank is going to be turned off, and those active guns are going to be turned off. You can actually stop them from shooting at you with a newt. So we go here to the newt, we get a Tech 2. You could do an unstable or a Tech 2. They're both the same. The unstable's easier to fit. Tech 2's usually cheaper, not always. And we throw it right there. Now, we're almost done with this fitting. When you run it, you're going to have the micro warp drive off. So I'll talk about how to use it in just a second. But one more thing I want to show you that I don't usually do in EFT, but I always do in game, is I want to take and show you how you're actually going to set this up on your ship. So for many of the fights, you're going to want to overload your guns, because you see that increases your DPS quite a bit. Now you see this 50 seconds, that's how on average how long it's going to take for your guns to burn out. We can make that better by doing this. Moving your newt in between the guns, making sure to reload our ammo, and booyah. Now we've got 55 seconds, an extra 5 seconds on average that you're going to be able to overload your gun because you're using that neutralizer as a heat sink. So what we have now is 426 DPS output and 16,000 hit points without the defensive mode. Next is our implants. For our implants, we are going to first, the most important implant for this ship is this one right here, the SP603. The SP603 costs roughly 1 million ISK, sometimes less. Used to only be 300,000, but more people are using them now, and the price has gone up. It gives you 3% increase to turret DPS, so 426, 439. If we go back to non-overloaded, that's 370, 382. It's a nice little increase. The next implant I think you're going to want to get is going to be the RF 901. This is the Rapid Fire 901. It makes you fire 1% faster. All these implants are cheap. I'm not getting expensive here. I'm not telling you to go spend a fortune. These are implants that you can take out and you can get potted and not even care. RF 901, boom. That's going to give you an extra 1% more DPS output. You can go with the RF 903. If you are using active guns that used capacitor, I would suggest instead of the RF 901s or the IF 900 series, I would go with the SS 900 series. Those give you more damage. Increased cycle speed on your guns is going to use up more capacitor on active guns such as energy gun turrets and hybrids. These are autocannons. They don't take capacitor, so a faster rate is going to equate to more DPS on the field than a higher damage per shot, and I can't go into why. It would take too long, but basically more shots is better. So faster rate, we're good. The next implant you're going to want to look at, there's maybe more in here you could look at that could be good. You could get maybe a trajectory analysis. It's going to give you some fall off. Let's just add that just to have a look. 6.4, 6.5. But I don't really like that one. You could do a tracking on motion prediction. It's going to give you better tracking. I don't think tracking is going to be an issue here. It might, but I really doubt it. Not in most cases. I would probably look at something like mobility. And if I was going to go expensive on this ship, and it's not even all that expensive, but if I wanted to spend a little bit more money, I would get a Zora's custom navigation hyperlink. Not sure what those are running now. They used to run about 20 mil, but I think they've gone up a lot in price here in the last 3 to 6 months. It's going to give you more speed, 5% more speed. So that actually doesn't equate to all that much here because you're getting diminishing returns. So just an extra 100 and something. Probably not worth the money. So those are the two main implants. I would also get, where is it? Evasive maneuvering, I'd get a 701. I take that back. Having that 1%, you're already so agile that I think you're better off. You're better off with the fall off. That extra little bit of fall off is going to mean more to you than a small amount of agility. For slot 8, I would probably go, let's see. There's no good ones for slot 8 for adding to your damage. What about a passive tanking module? Now here's one that's interesting that might be better than a fall off one, is a shield management. That's going to give you an extra 1%. So let's try that. SM701 goes from, I'll put it in defensive mode first. Most of the time you're going to be in defensive mode, the majority of the time. 23,500. 23,700. 200 extra tank. I think I'd go with the fall off. 200 extra tank. If 200 extra tank makes the difference in your fight, then you just had one of the most amazing fights of your life. So I don't think it's probably going to make the difference, and we probably should go with the 701. Get the extra fall off. Then you've got 9, and well, we already got 9. So now you've got 8. 8 and 10. 10, there's not really not much you can put there. For 8, you could do this one. It's more structure. You could do, I don't know. We're going to do the HG 1001. Mild. It's 1% to armor, I believe. Yeah. You might as well just have something in that slot 10. They run about 300,000 ISK. Super cheap. And then let's just end this with a super cheap 803. Those are about 1 million ISK. And that's a little bit more hit points. So those are your implants. Boom. 3% DPS output, 1% fall off, 3% structure, 1% fire rate, damage output, 1% armor. Basic implants, nothing too special, nothing too fancy, but they'll get the job done. And that's it for the implants. You could also look at some drugs. Should be up here. Problem is there's not many drugs that are going to affect much of this. The only drugs that would be of much interest to you would be drop, which is 3% to your tracking. Again, I don't think track is going to be a problem. If it ever is, you simply switch to Sharpshooter Mode, and that problem goes away completely. It's a nice bonus to that. The other one you could use would be Quaif, which is a bonus to your speed, but that's pretty expensive, so you probably don't want to use that. And there is your basic fit for the Rifter on Roids Svipul buffer tanked PvP tactical destroyer. The last thing I'm going to say about this before I end the video, and I may do another video about some of the other fits for this, like the artillery fits with the 10 MN afterburner, or the fit that I really like that I'm thinking about using with a combat probe launcher, that one is an active tank. It uses a Pith C-type shield booster, and basically it can tank I think 600 DPS permanently. It's not an ASB, permanently tanks 600 DPS, and so you could go out into deep nullsec and hunt Tengus and all kinds of ratting ships and get some really cool kills with it. But the last thing to talk about it with the Svipul and this fit, the Rifter on Roids, we can even change the name. Rifter on Roids. The Rifter on Roids flying style, the tactics, how are we going to fly this? So the way these modes work is you can change the mode every 10 seconds, or to put it in a more accurate way, there is a 10-second cooldown every time you change the modes. However, when you do change the modes, it's instant. The change is instant. It happens right then. Therefore, you need to make the most out of switching modes to get the most out of your ship at the different stages of the fight. So if we break a fight down into stages, there's the initiation, the tackle, or the beginning of the fight. When you establish the point, you get in range, and you initiate the fight. There's the fight itself, the during, where you must put out as much DPS, and tank as much as possible. And there's the end where you loot, and that doesn't really matter. You get out, pretty much, is the end. The end part is the faster you can get off the field before his buddies land and gank you with 10 people. So for the initiation, the best possible thing we could have that's going to help us get a tackle, get in on the target quickly, and make it happen is going to be the propulsion mode. So we're going to want the propulsion mode as our standard that we're going to stay in when we're trying to get a tackle, because it's going to allow us to be more agile and more fast, so that we can overload and catch interceptors, overload the micro warp drive, or just in general get in, or if should we jump into a gate camp, potentially get out much quicker. So that's kind of your standard stay at. But it's going to take some practice. You need to get in the habit of, once the fight starts, you switch to defensive mode. And that's going to take your hit points up to 23,000, giving you a much better tank and allowing you to be more likely to win the fight. So start in propulsion mode for the initiation, and for the fight, you switch to defensive mode. If you see you're not tracking, you switch to Sharpshooter. Just keep in mind that there's going to be 10 seconds from the time you switch to a mode before you can switch to another.